we go. We're recording. Welcome to Preppers in Paradise. We'd like to start with a prayer. Alex's video may disappear, or my video may disappear as we... should we say both of the prayers? You can say the first one, I'll say the second one.
Absolutely.
All right, amazing. Okay, cool.
I'll take the first one. Okay, so this is a prayer for at the beginning of a task. You still hear me okay?
Yep.
It says, Lord God, our Savior, maker of all things, accept the prayer of your unworthy servants. Enable us now, without condemnation, to accomplish this task, the glory of your name, of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit, both now and ever, and to the ages of ages. Amen.
Another for a long project. God, the maker of all things, guide and bless our hands in this work which we have now begun to your glory. By your mighty strength, bring it to completion in due season, as you alone, the Almighty, are Almighty and the lover of mankind. Amen. Okay, well, look, if you're still here and you haven't been freaked out by two guys saying some prayers, welcome to Preppers in Paradise. You're truly welcome to this podcast that we have started quite quickly, quite on the hoof, and we've done our best to be prepared for this podcast about prepping, and here we are. Look, so I just wanted to say, just to qualify yourself, Alex, in particular, you have an extensive background in military intelligence, in space operations in particular. You're an expert in technology in a military context. You were also the Chief Innovation Officer for Kansas City, Missouri, around the time of COVID-19 in 2020, 2021. And you're also an avid, but also very proper Orthodox prepper, right? Would you say that's
Yep.
a fair
I
introduction?
would say hopefully that's accurate, yes.
And so, firstly, we wanted to discuss, prepping is something that has a connotation in people's minds and often can be misrepresented or misunderstood. For you, if you had to pin it down, what really is prepping?
Well, so first I'll say I say these things with a lot of forethought, a lot of time and energy has been expended in trying to answer these type of questions, right? And so there is a almost mindset in America, and I think I sent you an article on it, Will, but it basically speaks to why are Americans so big on prepping?
Mm-hmm.
Why is it such a thing here in this country? And it points to some of the uh, societal influence of things like organizations like the Boy Scouts, right?
Mm-hmm.
Always being prepared. Uh, the movies that we see where the tough guys, the pioneers heading west, it was also in books before film, basically were strong and independent
Mm-hmm.
uh, individuals that were able to, withstand difficulties and trials and survive basically in the West as they were moving west. And
Mm-hmm.
so there's kind of this whole mindset of being tough, being independent, and that's something that you will see in a lot of prepping materials.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and subject matter experts will talk about it from that perspective, being alone and unafraid. But my experience has been that that is not necessarily helpful in real world situations.
Okay.
We're human beings. We are, social animals. We have a need to be surrounded by others and integrated with others and working and living and speaking with other people. And when we're taken away from that, it brings a whole host of problems. I mean, that's pretty obvious, right? Someone goes to prison. If they do something really bad, they're sent into solitary confinement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why? Because it's miserable, right?
Yeah.
And so to think that prepping has to be someone who is alone and unafraid, themselves against the world and they don't need anybody is really a false pretext. It's
Hmm.
very um, non-practical even,
Hmm.
but definitely not orthodox in its perspective. So I've tried to avoid that over the years, and even more so in 2020. That was really made clear when we were all isolated from each other.
Hmm.
So what I would say is that um, yeah, where prepping typically starts out, and I'm not saying every situation, but people are typically scared about something that's happening or potentially going to happen. And so they start thinking, well, what am I going to do? What am I going
Hmm.
to do? And it causes anxiety, it causes fear. And but depending on the people, then they get motivated to try to start doing things to prepare for that situation. And the problem is when your primary motivation is fear, you're going to do things you probably shouldn't.
Hmm.
If you're motivated by fear and have zero experience in practical prepping, you're
Hmm.
going to waste money
Hmm.
and make a lot of mistakes that you'll wish you hadn't later. So I guess the point is I'm hoping to convey some of the experience I've got and some of the lessons that I've learned
Hmm.
in the past to your audience
Hmm.
on this show, and hopefully to help individuals to practically prep, right,
Hmm.
but also to do it in an orthodox manner,
Hmm.
to where they're not making mistakes and not getting distracted and going the wrong direction. So
Hmm. You said basically the main thing is that most prepping, 90% perhaps of prepping actually comes from a place of fear,
sure.
but that's not prepping.
No, no, it's not. If you're responding to fear, you're just reacting, and you're actually not doing so wisely. Um, fight or flight. I guess you could say the people that say, well, there's horrible things coming down the road. I see them coming, and I'm just going to not do anything about it. That
Hmm.
might be the flight aspect of us. And then the
Yeah.
fight aspect might be, oh, I'm going to get ready for it. I'm going to hunker down, buy as much canned good as I can, get beans and bullets, and I'm going to fight it out. And maybe that's the fight aspect of individuals. But
Yeah.
I don't think either one, both are extremes. And I don't think, either one is correct. And I think you can prep with an orthodox mindset and do so correctly.
Yeah. I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, the thing is, it's like it's all very well and good saying, "Yeah, yeah, don't be afraid, don't be afraid." Yeah, but if a nuclear war is like about to happen, like how realistically, like how can you actually not be afraid? Like,
So here's the thing. I'll tell you this. Here's an analogy. My 16-year-old daughter um, is looking at leaving the house here in the near future, right?
hmm.
And to her, the thought of having to get a job, live on your own, pay rent, have your own apartment, furnish your own apartment, have your own vehicle, maintain your own vehicle, drive your own vehicle, go to work, have to learn everything what it's like to be at work, all the interpersonal skills you'll have to gain if you don't have them already, just the nuances of working
Hmm.
with others in a high stress environment. She's dreading those things
Hmm.
naturally because they're unfamiliar to her, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm not saying that I've lived through a nuclear war, right? I have been in a combat zone, um, you know,
Where was
but
that? Sorry, just touch on that.
in
So,
Iraq, in
yeah,
Iraq. So, but the point is that, to her, something is extremely anxious, right? She can get anxious about, and a little worried about. I mean, it's natural, it's normal. Kids do it.
yeah,
But to me, I get up and do it every day. I get up and do it
yeah.
every day. And so, it's really not a concern for me. I think for many of us, depending on your generation, the most stressful things that we've experienced have probably been the COVID pandemic, right?
Mm.
If you want to call it that. Maybe Y2K coming about. People were pretty stressed about that. Maybe the downturn economically. in the United States from our perspective, the financial crisis that was happening then, um, and maybe 9/11, right?
Yeah.
If you were personally impacted that by that,
Hmm.
but most of our society just went about their normal lives, really wasn't impacted by that. So we didn't have the Great Depression, I guess is the point. We didn't have World War One or
Yeah.
World War Two in this generation, right?
Right.
So when we talk about doing things without being in fear, a lot of that fear comes from just the cush lifestyle we all lead and
Absolutely.
the unrealistic expectations many of us have
Yeah.
about maintaining that lifestyle forever, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
don't interfere with my comfort zones.
Yeah.
Um,
I
so
mean, I was just thinking about, like, this most stressful thing. I was thinking about COVID, and I was thinking, actually, there's something about that whole scenario that I know it sounds a bit sick, but that I kind of got into gear for. Like, it was almost as though I knew that at some point in my lifetime there was going to be a big shakeup of some sorts.
absolutely,
And when it came, it was like, okay, cool. Like, I kind of knew that the life as we knew it was fragile. Like, the kind of uh like, globally, the economy, in
yes,
terms of our access to supermarkets. Like, I used to walk down the supermarkets and just think, isn't it just so mad that I just go down 5 minutes down the street? I live in central London. I can go into Waitrose, very nice supermarket, and I can go get whatever I want. I can get organic beef. I can get, nice salad. I can go get some tiramisu, whatever. Lovely. But you don't stop to think that, hang on a sec, like, this is just a complete historical anomaly. Like,
yes,
complete historical anomaly,
yes.
right? I can just
It's a
hop on
very fragile
Amazon.
system. Yeah, very
Totally
fragile
fragile,
system.
totally unsustainable, like, totally, like, weird. I can just hop on my phone and order something from Amazon, a microphone for this podcast, and get it to come tomorrow. You know, and that
Yeah,
that is something we've got so used to. But I almost feel like, maybe God has lost patience with us with that, because it's like, look, what if I just pull the rug out? What are you going to do? Like, what are we going to do if that all just gets pulled away from us? What is it going to expose in our character? What is it going to expose in our community? What is it going to expose in our family? Like, with COVID, families got tore apart. Like,
yes,
communities
yes,
got tore apart. Whole segments of society were against each other because of a perceived, uh, complete, like, disjunct. And that really revealed something to me, well, to all of us. But that was just the beginning, really, right? Like, in many ways, if you've clicked on this podcast, Preppers in Paradise, you're not going to be someone who's under the illusion that that kind of thing is not going to happen at some point, or worse.
right,
But, like,
right.
what do we how do we the whole point of this podcast is, like, okay, so, like, but what does it mean to be prepared for that? What does that mean?
Yeah, yeah. We won't address all of that
Of course
in
not.
this episode for sure. And actually, well, you probably ought to tell people about yourself a little bit. Who are you? Why are
Yes.
you doing this? What's your background?
Okay, well, I'm just some dude in London, man. No. So, look, I'm a young, entrepreneur. I have a business. We build gardens, and part of that, the USP of that business is to help people to become more self-sufficient, and to be prepared. I've always had an interest in, off-grid living. I've, explored those kind of options for myself, but as of yet, I'm in an urban setting. I'm in London. I'm 2 minutes down the road from St. Paul's. So, if a missile gets dropped on London, I'm here.
You toast. Yeah.
I'm here. So, but, of course, also, we're both Orthodox Christians, so that's how we know each other. We know each other
Yes.
through another podcaster, Buck Johnson, and Counterflow, and
Hmm.
and 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 it's brought us
Shout out to
together.
Buck.
Shout
Shout
out
out
to
to Buck.
Buck. Shout out to Father Turbo as well. Um, for also his words on this. It would be amazing to speak to him. But
Oh yeah.
basically, I'm
Oh
I'm a
yeah.
young Orthodox guy living in London, trying to make sense of what I can do personally in my business, in my community, about the age we're living in. the time that we're living in. And I stumbled across your content online with Buck, and I just thought, man, I have to talk to Alex. I just have to find a way to connect with this man. And I'm very blessed. We're very blessed that we have the opportunity to talk about this across the Atlantic. And because another thing just to say is that obviously in America, prepping is quite it's a buzzy topic, and it has been for a while. But
Big
in the
business.
UK, it's a big business as well, which
Absolutely.
we will explore at some point. But it's in the Europe and in the UK. Ironically, we're probably closer to. I mean, I don't know. It's arguable, but it's not something that people are very well versed in, and it's usually takes the form of survivalists or like kind of like green minded kind of like off gridders. But there's not much about like, okay, what do you do if you're just a normal person in an urban or rural setting to prepare yourself? um we're not talking about being in the woods and being Bear Grylls, nor are we talking about going and homesteading. We're talking about like, what can you do for the average Joe? um
I think, Will, it's kind of important to bring up what is the distinction between prepping. Then what the heck is prepping, right?
what
For
is
people
prepping?
listening to this podcast, saying, well, you just said a couple things, you said, homesteading.
Yeah.
Okay. You said, I mean, there's people that are like concerned about emergency management situations, right?
Hmm.
So how is prepping different than homesteading or emergency management situations? And if you want to say, tell me what you think. I'd be interested in your perspective, but I'll give you mine afterwards
Hmm.
if you want to address that.
What?
How is
Sorry.
it not survival? I guess is the question.
You tell
It's
me.
it's
I
not the
mean,
same thing.
I would say you tell me, because, as I said, you're the
Okay.
expert.
Well, so to me, prepping is not just what the Mormons recommend. You can go to Mormon websites and get a lot of good recommendations on how to establish a food pantry for
Hmm.
emergencies, how to you know take care of yourself in a crisis. Same thing with FEMA. You can go to FEMA's website.
Hmm.
The Brits have a website that I sent to you that we'll talk about in a future time if you don't have it handy on you. But it's all emergency management, basically, right? With the assumption that society and people will work together in a crisis to accomplish and to ensure survival of the community on the whole. There's civil defense as well, right? So during the wars, there were civil defense brigades, and people would come together and do their victory gardens, and they would, prepare for bombing raids in the UK, and just work together as a community, try to help each other survive. And I would say that that's really not prepping. It is more emergency management response. Okay. Um, what delineates prepping from homesteading, which is basically living out in the country, learning skills, maybe even being self sufficient, right?
Hmm.
I think prepping takes on a perspective of there are some not so nice aspects of society, okay?
Hmm.
Especially today, there are elements in society that probably will not be helpful. Maybe they're criminal elements, maybe they're uh, individuals with other problems who will not want to be working and helping society. There are people who will want to take off and be isolated and be on their own.
Hmm.
But I think what prepping does is it does prepare you for those emergency situations, just like emergency managers do. If you're able to, as much as you can, you will embrace homesteading and the things that you learn in homesteading and being independent, right, off the grid is very, very helpful.
Hmm.
Because if you're there already, and if you're there naturally, when a crisis comes along, you kind of continue to be off the grid. So there's a lot of practical reasons for being uh, well aware of and practice in homesteading. But prepping takes into consideration the fact that there's some bad actors out there. There's some bad people out there.
Hmm.
And they may, in desperation, in fear, depending on the crisis, potentially try to take what you have for
Hmm.
themselves, or may join with others who do not want to be a part of society that is working together. And so may form criminal elements that try to do things to either disrupt or to take away from the efforts of emergency managers. It really it really takes a look at the situations, and I would say is a little less optimistic about assumptions made about people in society and how they will respond to a crisis. Okay, I would say that when you go to the FEMA website, they don't talk about defending your home. They don't talk about defending yourself with
Hmm.
fighting positions. They don't talk about, if an enemy army invades, how
Hmm.
do you survive? What do you do? It's all practical things like have plenty of water and have
Yeah.
your emergency supplies and have your medical supplies and think about your pets. It's those practical things, but it's not the topics of, well, what happens if China invades? What happens if Russia launches a nuke and the infrastructure is out of whack for quite some time, right? It's typically shorter duration, but we've seen that even that mindset, even those things recommended, they don't necessarily always apply. When we got hit with multiple hurricanes in the United States during the time of Hurricane Helene, FEMA could not respond. The National Guard in each state tried to respond as best as they could, but when you're talking Florida and North Carolina and Tennessee and all these other countries that were impacted by something large, it just overwhelms the system. It
Mm.
overwhelms the processes in place. Because when people exercise things from an emergency management perspective, they're usually smaller, local, regionalized exercise. And even if they
Mm.
go into a larger region, it's very orchestrated and it's very coordinated, and not necessarily realistic. It doesn't throw in all the Murphy's laws,
Mm.
issues where your best planning fails at first contact. It doesn't.
Yeah.
They don't typically do that. So
So are you saying that so the distinction between prepping and emergency management from like a civil or local government perspective is that prepping is more about what do you do from a grassroots, like what do you do in a grassroots situation where there are bad actors specifically.
I think prepping takes into consideration the fact that the world is not full of the nicest people with the nicest intentions.
Hmm.
Um, but I think it also takes into consideration the fact that our governments are not always the nicest people with the nicest intentions. Okay, some of
No,
which
my
we
government's
experienced
great.
in some of which we experienced in 2020 through
Yes.
2023. So I mean, there are a whole host of things happening as well, that we're seeing from a digital prison perspective, if you want to call it that,
Yeah.
okay, to where rights and liberties of individuals may be challenged.
So
And
if I just stop you there, sorry. So
yeah,
just basically we're talking about that the prepping as like a methodology, let's say, has within it inherently the notion and the fundamental realization that actually like there are forces, people, there are organizations which a in a conflict or kind of
crisis
emergency
and
in
a
a
crisis,
crisis we will need to protect ourselves from and defend our communities, families, and wider
churches.
society against.
Yes,
Right. So that's the
absolutely.
that's the difference. It's not, hey, there's a hurricane, and therefore we need to, like, or there's a flood. It's like we need to recognize that the societal and social order that we currently have, or let's say like the global economic like system that we have, is not, we shouldn't take for granted, and that it could, if it does collapse, therefore we need to defend ourselves against certain people or organizations or
Right.
forces, right?
Yes, absolutely. So I'm looking at this civil defense book. Okay.
Yeah.
It's called The Civil Defense Book Emergency Preparedness for a Rural or Suburban Community by Michael Mabee, Mabee. Okay.
Okay. Yeah.
And so I'm looking at the chapters. Okay. And he's referring to emergency preparedness with the civil defense book, okay, not necessarily as prepping, okay. He does have, he talks a lot about community. Makes sense, right?
Yeah.
That's something that we learned in 2020, that no man is an island unto himself.
Yeah.
And it sucks to be isolated. And there's a whole host of mental and spiritual things that you will face if you ever are isolated, right? So there
Yeah.
is a need for a community, which is great that this book talks about it, okay? They talk about water teams, food teams, home checklists, home bags, okay? But this guy that wrote this book, okay, took a lot of what he's seen from civil defense in the past, but then he also put in a portion on developing a militia, okay?
Yeah.
What are militia requirements? What are their qualifications? What is a code of conduct you could put together for it, right? Um, which is great, but it kind of is outside the norm of what you might think of for emergency preparedness and what you might find reference wise when you're looking at Mormon websites or FEMA websites or maybe the UK's website
Yeah.
that I sent you earlier. So it's like, okay, well, is that maybe more prepping? I'd say, yeah, I'd say it is, because it's an understanding that there's a defensive aspect of things to where you might have to make hard decisions to where someone else could potentially um, physically be apprehended or prevented from causing damage to you or your community.
Hmm. And so prepping in, let's say, popular culture, right? You see people hold up in, like some isolated remote place with all their tins of beans and their guns, and they're waiting, right, for disaster.
Hmm. Yeah.
That's not really prepping proper, is it? Like that's.
So it's not proper prepping. It's not what I would refer to as proper prepping. I think it's a very bad concept that is not sustainable for any real duration of time. Um, unless you want to live with a nutcase, or unless you want to turn into a nutcase who lives in fear and anxiety and shoots people who try to take his beans. I just I don't see that as a good formula. And what you're seeing in common uh, prepping shows, I mean, a lot of it is extremely unrealistic. Drives me nuts. I can't even watch things that talk about the zombie apocalypse. Okay,
Hmm.
it's just stupidity. It's absolute stupidity. But people typically will talk about one of two things: bugging out.
Yeah.
How do you get out of your city in the event of a crisis, which
Yeah.
which can be very unrealistic depending on the scenario,
Yeah.
because roads get blocked.
Hmm.
If there's, say, a nuclear attack, people get blinded by a blast. They lose control of their vehicles. There's multiple. I mean, you're talking dozens, if not hundreds, of crashes on a highway. How are
Hmm.
you going to drive your big old bug out vehicle on the highway? You're not, right? Because it's going to be obstructed.
Hmm.
If so that's a whole topic we can talk about another time,
Yeah.
specifically like whether to bug out or not. But typically, people either bug out or they have a predetermined location that they try to get to right ahead
Hmm.
of time as quickly as they can, or they just hunker down and
Hmm.
they take care of themselves where they're at, build up the Alamo, and try to defend themselves, their family, maybe a couple individuals, and keep themselves safe. And it's really focused on safety and self-preservation.
Yeah.
So personally, I don't feel that that is a wise way of looking at prepping, or even an orthodox way of looking at prepping. I don't think it's
Yeah.
a good for the soul um,
No.
way to approach things, and it is very much fear driven. The Probably the biggest problem with prepping culture um, is that it is beyond fear focused, it's stuff focused. All right.
Yeah.
So if I just get this next product, okay,
Yeah. Yeah.
which people don't think about, the sponsors, the influencers, they get those things free to test them, right?
Yeah.
To talk about them, get to keep them. So these influencers get a lot of these products and will talk them up,
Yeah.
but never have really used them in a realistic situation. And so it tends to be get more and more and more, buy more stuff, get more stuff.
Yeah.
Oh, I don't have enough. I need more food.
Yeah.
You know, 3 days is not enough. I need 3 weeks. 3 weeks
Yeah.
is not enough. I need 3 months. I need 3 years,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And so
Yeah.
you can easily get carried away and spend way too much money
Oh, totally.
um,
And you know, the
on
thing is,
prepping.
like, the thing that I always remember, and I think that it just ties in so much with having faith and also definitely running a business, is
Hmm.
that, even a small business, is that it's really not about how much resources you have, it's about how resourceful you can be. So,
Yeah.
you could put someone in any scenario, and, it's about how they think, it's about how they act, it's about how they can draw upon the skills of people around them and build up networks where you're sharing knowledge, sharing responsibility, sharing skills, and actually, it doesn't matter. You could have all the tins of beans and lentils in your cellar that you want, but
Yeah.
if you've got the wrong like attitude, or if you've got the wrong approach, and you can't be resourceful and generous and and skillful in your relationships, then forget it. Like, there's no point. There's literally no point. You may as well you literally like throw the lentils away and focus on, okay, like, how am I going to become more of a resourceful individual, so that it doesn't matter what scenario I'm in, I'm going to find a way to look after myself, the people around me, and ultimately do God's will, to live in the integrity of who you want to be, rather than being,
Yeah.
a
That's
coward or
um that's a quote people need to write down. It's not how many resources you have, it's how resourceful you can be in that
yeah.
situation. There's a reason it's called prepping,
Hmm.
right? Not responding,
Hmm.
okay, or reacting. It's
Hmm.
called prepping because when there is a crisis, which there will be crises in the future, right? We know
Hmm.
it. We've seen it.
Yeah.
People were living fat, dumb, and happy in Ukraine, before February 24th, 2022,
Hmm.
and they did not expect to be at war for 3 years later, right? I mean,
Hmm.
it was just very few people could foresee something like that given the
Yeah.
situation. So, prepping is about a crisis, but there's things you do before a crisis, things you do when a crisis kicks off, and things you do after a crisis. So, pre-crisis, crisis, post-crisis,
Hmm.
prepping really helps you to focus on the pre-crisis portion, right? And to an extent, the crisis and post-crisis as well.
Yeah.
But you put most of your effort into the pre-crisis in the hopes that you will be able to survive the crisis and
Hmm.
continue to survive post-crisis. Um, that's that's important to understand because there are things that when a crisis comes, it's too late for you to do. That you should have thought about this before. Um, a lot of prepping has to do with a lot of research,
Hmm.
reading, studying, analyzing, critical thinking, right? Understanding your operational environment, understanding the the possibility of a crisis actually taking place. So, what is the likelihood of something happening versus the impact to you, your family, your community, right?
Hmm.
So when I give prepping courses, when I go to churches or communities and I talk to people about prepping, I've got a presentation,
Yeah.
and eventually, some point, we can show that. But really, it comes down to okay, there's so many crazy things that can happen in this world, which is what causes a lot of people to throw up their hands and say, "I'm not going to prep. I'm
Yeah.
not going to be a prepper. What's the point?
Yeah.
I'll pray. I'll pray." And great, pray, absolutely. You can pray as you're prepping. You can pray as the crisis is going on. You can pray as the crisis is resolved. So, yes, absolutely pray all the time. We should be, as Orthodox Christians, praying all the time. But there are skills that you have to learn ahead of time
Hmm.
that take time, and you need to make sure that you're trying to obtain as many of those skills as you can ahead of time, or just even the knowledge base. Try to acquire the knowledge base that's practical. So, for example, comet and coming, out of space and hitting London. You know, Are you on this show going to tell everyone what to do if a comet comes and hits central London? I would think it's probably not very practical, okay? Because if we're talking a comet the size of something that hit caused the dinosaurs and to disappear and things like that, I mean, it's really kind of like maybe not so much worth your time, right?
Yeah.
Maybe society will survive. Maybe the seeds that are frozen up in can't remember which country it is where they have the seed stores deep underground. Maybe that'll survive for future generations, but practically it's not really something you could probably impact much. Okay. And there are situations I think that, it's wasting your time to prepare for.
Yeah,
Um,
I mean, but the thing is, like the reason why we're doing this podcast today in particular is because
mhm.
certain events are happening, certain events have
Yes.
happened,
Oh yeah.
and the whole point of, we could have spent a lot more time preparing for this podcast, let's say,
Mhm,
but
mhm,
actually, I mean, it's not an accident that, the 2 weeks after we started talking or something like that, Iran, Israel did actually. At the time of recording, it was yesterday,
yeah.
um, and they and it's happened, and we know that, without going into like speculating too much about, prophecy or things like that, because we're not priests, we're not really qualified, but we do
Mhm.
know from Orthodox literature that, when Israel strikes Iranian nuclear,
Facilities. Yep.
facilities, we are entering into a hot phase of a global conflict,
Absolutely.
not a regional conflict in the Middle East, not just even a conflict in the kind of wider sort of region there. We're talking about a global conflict of the proportions of World War II,
Mhm.
and possibly worse. We're not sure. Sometimes the prophecies can be as a warning to help us to change course as a as
To
a as a
repent.
as a species, to repent,
Yep.
to
Yep.
change our ways, and they add those layers of like extremity to the prophecy to warn humankind, and that has happened in the past. So we're not saying, can't say with any certainty what's going to happen, to what extent, but we know that we're entering into a hot phase of a global conflict, and frankly, if we're already in a very global conflict, but it's currently contained in regional kind of areas, and it hasn't necessarily hit the phase where it's like a domino effect. Um, so that's why we're doing it today. Like, but so what? Yeah, of course, a comet is
So
not going to hit central London, but like, what is
right.
likely? What's likely to
Right.
happen?
So a zombie apocalypse is not going to happen. Okay.
Okay,
And a comet hitting is a whole different level of things that you can and can't do for it. Okay. And yes, there are. So it's not realistic. I think we've established is a foolish notion, right? Because I do think a nuclear weapon being used at some point in the near future is a very real possibility, right? There's the
right,
doomsday clock.
right.
Tulsi Gabbard, who I think is right on the money. Um, 99.9% of the time, the things that she says, she's got it. She
Yeah.
just put out a thing warning people about nuclear war and how serious it is. She visited Hiroshima, Nagasaki, and said that's nothing compared to what can take place today. So
Hmm.
she's vigilant, she's watchful, she understands. I think it is. I think a nuclear weapon being used is very possible and
Hmm.
very likely in the near future. And
And
it may not
are we
be.
talking in the next few months? Are we talking the next few years?
I'm
What we say?
talking in the next year, the next couple years, I think.
Yeah.
I don't. So here's the thing, right? So, yes, I was a military intelligence officer, had a TS clearance, SCI clearance for 20 years, 22 years.
That's top
I was a
secret
chief,
clearance, right?
yeah, top secret, sensitive compartmented information clearance.
Yeah.
Read into multiple SAPs and everything in the past. That's all part of my resume. That
Yeah.
there's nothing I can't. But the you know, the fact that nefarious actors have tried and would love to put a dirty bomb, a dirty nuke, right, into our one of our cities. There's no one says that's unrealistic. It's very unrealistic. We've got three-letter agencies that are making sure that doesn't happen every day, right? We're looking for people bringing, chemical, biological, radiological weapons into our country. We're watching for them 24/7, right? With
Hmm.
all of
Hmm.
our resources,
Hmm.
um, making sure that doesn't happen.
Hmm.
Same
Hmm.
thing with the UK. You know, we don't live in a nice little friendly world. We live in a big bad world, and there are countries that would love to see us destroyed and our way of life destroyed.
Hmm.
And yes, there's geopolitical machinations taking place with Russia, Iran,
Hmm.
North Korea,
Hmm.
China, and if you're not paying attention to the theme of regime change,
Hmm.
it's been happening for years.
Hmm.
Look at Iraq, Saddam Hussein. Look at Muammar Gaddafi in Libya. Look at Syria, right? Al-Assad in Syria.
Yeah.
Take a look. Take a look at what's happening and tell me that North Korea and Putin and Russia are not scared to death that they're next on the list for regime change. And now Tehran.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, if you look at what took place recently, it wasn't just an attack on nuclear facilities. It was getting rid of key leadership,
Yeah.
strategic leadership, and that continues. Hmm. I wonder what's going on in Iran.
Hmm. Hmm.
I mean, it's obvious they're weak, they're on their knees, and so when a power faces a threat,
Hmm.
existential threat to their very existence, what are you going to do? Well, I don't know. Let's see. What does Islam teach is okay to do if you're about to die and be destroyed by, infidels? What is it okay to do? I don't know. Do some research on that. See what they would be okay with doing and think about how that might impact you. I don't know. It's just I
Yeah,
think
it's
yes.
interesting, when you kind of like, not to say that, there are lots of like people in Gaza as well who, innocent people who they say, they've been martyred, and that's like much more similar to the version of martyrdom that we talk about in Orthodox Christianity. Says, but yeah, it's a real thing, like going out with a bang is a
Yes,
real thing, you know,
yes it is.
and often I could, I spent my we were talking about 9/11 earlier on, and like I spent my whole childhood being brainwashed by the BBC that, uh like Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, and therefore we had to go and invade. I literally spent my whole life being brainwashed about that. So
Yeah, but
it's
now
two.
people are smart enough and realize it was a load of crap, right?
Yeah, so there's two
Now
sides to it.
people,
It's two
yeah,
sides to it. They take something that's true about a regime, whatever. Like, I'm not saying I'm a massive fan of the Iranian regime. Like, I'm not.
hmm
I'm not saying
hmm
that, like, yeah, they're my heroes. I'm just saying that, like, they have an ideology. Israel have an ideology. The US and the UK have an ideology that is somewhat and kind of intertwined and aligned. Europe is another whole thing which we can talk about, because obviously, that we left the European Union. The whole idea, the whole notion of Europe is a whole thing. But, all these things have truth and they have lies to them, right? There's some truth and there's some lies to them. But the thing is, the truth is that there are regimes around the world which are so backed into a corner that they could do something very unpredictable. So North Korea,
absolutely,
it is one.
absolutely.
North Korea. I don't believe that Russia is one. Personally, I don't think that actually they're powerful. They are powerful enough. They're strong enough. That I don't. They've got enough clout to not be so much backed into a corner, especially with China. But the thing is, China and Russia combined, like that's like, they're enemies, but they can be friends for a while, right?
Wasn't it the head of Palantir just said yesterday? It's not just going to be a single front war. If we go to war with Iran, the United States, it would actually be a multi-front war with
Yeah,
China, Russia,
Russia.
and Iran.
Yes.
And guess what? North Korea pulled into it as well.
Yeah.
And so these are things that, subject matter experts on the topic, geopolitical strategists are
Yeah.
talking about weighing and taking seriously as potential courses of action, right?
Yeah.
It's not your guys who are sitting there, two influencer young guys, reading social media
Yeah.
threads and checking out the news and trying to predict geopolitically what's going to happen. I mean, these are subject matter experts that are talking this stuff, to live it, eat it, breathe it, and they're saying that
I'm
these things
I'm
are
I'm the
likely to
former,
happen.
by the way. I fit into the former category, by the way.
But So when that's the reality, you kind of pay attention. So
Yeah.
so global thermonuclear war taking place where everyone's launching missiles at each other. Is that going to happen anytime soon? I don't think so. Is it worth your time worrying about it? I really don't think so.
Hmm.
Is there a possibility of a single bomb taking place somewhere in the Middle East in the very near future? I think that's a real possibility if there's an existential threat to a current regime.
Yeah.
Is there something going to happen in the United States? I think there's a possibility of that. I know from personal experiences that those are things that we prevented from taking place in the past. Okay,
Yeah.
dirty bombs in our city. So, um, yeah. So
So,
there's there.
we're just saying.
Yeah,
So we're saying, okay, a comet's not going to fall on London. You're not going to have a zombie apocalypse. However, the possibility of thermonuclear war in the next few years is more likely.
not thermonuclear war where everyone's launching nukes at everyone, because that's the end of society as we know it.
Fine,
But
but some kind of
one
nuclear
or
exchange
yeah,
of
nuclear.
tactical nuclear weapons
Yeah, either a
is
tactical nuclear weapon being used, yep, as a response, show of force, or even a missile being used, or as a last ditch effort, potentially using them, or if someone feels threatened enough, trying to make a statement, depending on what takes place, right? Yes, I think it's a very reasonable expectation to have that.
Mm,
You probably ought to learn how to deal with radiation. How do you
mhm.
respond if the bomb goes off,
Yeah,
anywhere near you, or uh, in your country? What do you do? What's going to happen? What should you prepare for? How do you do that? And I think we'll talk about all those things in future shows,
yeah,
right?
we
Not
will.
today.
No,
But we'll go over the details of all that for your listeners.
I mean, in terms of that, just because those will be full episodes, right? So, like a full episode can be dedicated really to
Sure.
what
How
do
to
you
respond
do
to a nuclear
in a
bomb,
nuclear
nuclear,
attack,
yeah, yeah,
depending on where you are, the resources available to you, etc. But then
yeah,
also other things that could happen. For instance, biowarfare.
yeah. Yeah,
That's
so
another
we
thing that
just,
can happen.
I mean, agro-terrorism, okay? We just in the United States caught a woman in a University of Michigan, I think is where she was bringing in bioterror weapons
Hmm.
for testing. And it wasn't the first time that it happened. And she wasn't the first individual Chinese national, Chinese student,
Yep,
that did it. It's like, what? I mean, it's like, how long has this been happening? How many times? Well, we know of at least a few times, right? And it
yep.
would bring our agriculture to its knees. So,
So she was bringing in certain. What was she bringing in? She was bringing in certain
yeah,
sorts.
I got to look it up. I got to look it up exactly what she was doing. But can you
What was
still
the
hear
name?
me?
If you keep your video on, I can look it up. What was it?
Okay, so if
Chinese
I were you,
student.
I would University of Michigan Chinese um, agriculture bioterror. See what that pulls up.
Bioterror.
I'll have one on me next time.
So, Michigan Chinese nationals charged with smuggling fungal toxic parasites into an agro. So, wow.
Yeah,
So two Chinese nationals smuggling a fungus
yeah.
called Fusarium gram graminarium, a potential agroterrorism weapon. Wow. So, a devastating fungal disease of wheat, barley, maize, and rice,
Oh, geez.
responsible for billions of dollars in economic losses worldwide each year. Wow.
Everything in our neck of the woods is corn, wheat, or
Yeah.
soybean.
Wow.
And so she's one. She's one, right? And they're
Yeah.
talking about two there that were caught. And God knows, we've got, last time I checked, we have 35,000 known illegal Chinese, illegal aliens here
Yeah.
from China, military age. Um, yeah, I mean, what are we doing with 35,000 illegal Chinese aliens in our country of
Yeah.
military age?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And they're walking on our military posts and they're
Yeah.
getting arrested for walking and
Yeah.
pacing off and checking out and videotaping our military installations. I mean,
Look, I mean, having open borders, whichever, like, let's just take your political persuasion out of the equation. Having open borders, allowing people into your country that you don't know anything about, not having proper systems of removing them when they do things that are against your laws, it doesn't make sense. It literally is like the opposite. You can't even have a country. Like you can't say you actually have a country if that's the case.
Yeah.
I would challenge
So
anyone, left or right, to argue with me that if you don't have proper borders where people who come into the country, you're able to know who they are, and if they commit a crime, you have ways of removing them from the country. It's not even a political issue, it's just common
no,
sense.
common sense, common sense. But that's something people lack nowadays. Will
Yeah,
that's something that's getting harder and harder to find. So
yeah,
going back, going back to what we're talking about here, and
yeah.
we're not offering. So something I'm going to say something you're going to hear me say it many times. I really detest when people, podcasters, influencers, merely um, admire a problem. Okay,
Hmm.
that drives
Yeah.
me nuts. It, yes, you can get a lot of money and get a lot of people following, motivating through fear and admiring problems. But I really like resolution to issues and to questions. And so the problem is, this is our first episode.
Yeah.
We're not going to talk about everything here now in this
No.
hour. So what I would say is I would encourage your listeners to stay tuned in and listen to us as we try to go through these different scenarios and continue with the discussions of how orthodoxy, proper Orthodox living, and our faith is applied as you do these things. There's a very practical aspect of it. When I take a long trip, if I'm going to go into a country I don't know, I do research, right? I do a lot of reading. What is the infrastructure like? What are the roads like? What is crime like? If I'm going to be driving a vehicle, do they have good vehicles?
Hmm.
Are rental companies reliable there? Are people going to stop me on the road and solicit me for money? I mean, if you're depending where you're going, you do a lot of preparation to ensure that your family, if you're going with them, are well aware what to expect. And you can't do it 100%. You know, there's a saying in the military, the best laid plans fail first contact.
Hmm.
And there's a reason for that because there's so many variables and there's so many things that are unknown. But you still have to prepare. You still have to come up with a plan. And so I hope that's what we'll do here on your show in the near
Yes.
future
Well, look, I mean,
for these individuals.
I think we should make a promise that every episode, rather than talking about all of these terrifying things, we make sure that there's something at the end of the episode which we can give people to take an action. Because ultimately, this is about empowering people to become
Absolutely.
more prepared, more resilient, and ultimately have deeper faith.
Absolutely.
We're not in the business of stoking fear. Ultimately,
Mhm.
so if you had the first principle, what can people do? What can people reflect on for until next time?
Here's what I would say. So I'm going to pull up something. I'm going to go blank for a second here.
Can we spell it
There are
up?
a lot of Orthodox Christians talking about predictions,
Yeah.
okay, coming in, and um, there's a whole bunch of concern about nuclear war. Okay, I'm going to read something that Father Moses McPherson. Have you heard of him? Will
Yeah.
he posted this on Facebook, and I agree with him. Um, wholeheartedly. A lot of prophecies have been shared on social media about our current times. Here are my thoughts. Number one, I did not follow Christ to become afraid. I followed him to get away from fear and anxiety. So say the Jesus prayer and fear nothing.
Hmm.
Okay. I think that is practical advice. Do not fear. Be what I like to call Orthodox brave. Okay.
Hmm.
My daughter just passed away after 2 years of cancer at 18. And boy, the pain, the suffering, and the things that she endured over that time taught her a whole lot about life, and what's important and what's true and what's good, and us as well in our household. Okay. and she bravely went to her repose, knowing and trusting that Christ was there with her
mm,
and for her. And so I would say we need to be of the same mindset. We need to be brave and take comfort in knowing that Christ is our God and
mm,
He is the ultimate thing in this world, the most powerful and fully in control of everything
mm,
uh, being that exists, and so we should take comfort in that. So
mm,
don't be afraid. Say the Jesus prayer and fear nothing. Second thing, Father Moses said, there are those who peddled fear all during the pandemic. I'm just not interested. And bingo, I said the same thing to my family before reading this. I was like, listen, we learned a lot from COVID,
mm,
and one thing we should have really seen is that God is with us.
mm,
God is with us through all these struggles and difficulties, and He will take us to where we need to be, and
mm,
He knows best where we need to be, right? It may not be safe and secure keeping your job. It may be losing your job. It may be moving to another state. But in the end, God is with us and we will overcome
mm,
the difficulties, the trials, the challenges we face. And
mm,
if it does result in death, that's okay,
mm,
because that's where we want to be anyway,
mm,
right?
mm, mm,
That's where we want to be. Uh, that's something we take comfort in
mm,
knowing our daughter, where she's at. She's in the place my wife and I want
mm,
ourselves and our kids all to be one day. So she's already there. So we're looking forward to seeing her there in the future.
mm,
A monk on Athos, here he continues with number 3. A monk on Mount Athos once had a vision that showed the end times, and he said, time was expanding and contracting like an accordion due to people's repentance. Unquote. Father Moses says, we never know with certainty where we are in the story and what can change. That's absolutely true. We've
mm,
already referred to that. That's absolutely true.
mm,
Number 4, no matter what happens, Christ will show me what to do next, and I'll do it. Until that happens, I still need to complete today's tasks because each day has enough anxiety of its own.
mm,
Those are 4 things he posted on Facebook
mm,
here, given all the predictions that people have been, pointing to, and not that they're incorrect, they're accurate
mm.
predictions, but you can't. The result of reading them can't be fear and anxiety.
Yeah.
Okay, it has to be a calm resolve that, you'll do what you can do with the resources that you have. You will be resourceful with what's available to you in your community, right?
Mm,
Um, and there are practical things you can do. There's nothing contrary with taking prepping precautions at the same time as not having fear with a situation. It
mm.
doesn't mean you just say, "Oh, I'm not going to be fearful. I'm going to pray and see and let it all fall into God's hands."
Yeah.
You know, you're preparing your car for a road trip. You can
Mm,
prepare your family for a crisis that may be taking place in your country in the near
mm,
future.
mhm.
It just both are practical,
Yeah.
both make sense as long as the intent is correct. You're doing the right thing. So
Mm.
I guess I'll leave that for today's practical, some resolution to some of the things we're talking about.
Amen. And even if you aren't even a Christian, just try the Jesus prayer. Like, and actually
Yeah.
and actually that is an action. You know, people might say, "Oh, what do you mean? Just pray, blah blah blah." No, no, no. Like, or have faith. Like, how do I take action in having faith? You pray.
Jesus Christ, Son of God, have mercy upon me, a sinner. That's the
Yeah,
Jesus prayer.
yeah,
And if I mean, it's extremely helpful.
yeah.
It's extremely helpful in a time of crisis. So
Completely transformative. There was one other prayer that I saw today that actually Saint Paisios talks about. He says, I think Metropolitan Neophytos, which we hope maybe we could speak with him. I don't know. That would be amazing. We could speak.
if anyone
He
has
said,
any connections, hook us up. Let us
"Hey,
talk to
well,
them.
there we go. I think we can do that. I think we can do it, God willing." But he was pressing him once, and he said, just please, just give me a prayer that I can say, like a really really powerful prayer. Like, give me like a nuclear bomb of a prayer. He said, "Oh, okay, I'll give you this one." He said, "No, no, no, something more powerful. Come on, I need it to be so strong." He said, "Okay, okay, this prayer I have found defeats all negative emotions, all psychological afflictions, all demonic activity. And he says, "Great is the name of the Holy Trinity, most holy Mother of God, save us."
Yeah.
And he said that is like, if you want to go nuclear and you're having a moment, that prayer, bang.
Good. That's good.
I mean, okay, well, until next time, preppers, hopefully we'll see you in paradise. God bless.
Take care.